Welcome to our second channel, More What the Rust. Can you install quality aftermarket AC in your old car for under $800? I don't know, but we're going to find out. A couple of important things to keep in mind. There are no sponsorships with anything having to do with this video. All the parts I use are from vendors that don't know I have a channel and have no idea I'm making a video. This is completely unbiased. Of course, I'm going to show the vendor's products, I'm going to show their prices, and I'm going to show you how it's done. But if you really want an unblemished view of whether this is possible, this is your video. Let's start by taking a look at the donor car. Very typical old car. It's a 1954 Chevy 150. Never came with AC, never came with even heat. It was an option that this car didn't have. And we're going to install it here. This is a small block Chevy engine that I put in this car. Very typical. Your car does not have to be a small block Chevy. All the principles I show you will apply. It's got an aftermarket aluminum radiator in it. It runs super cool today. We're going to see how it runs when all this is done. But there's really nothing special about this setup. We're going to put the compressor on the passenger side because there's tons of room in here other than the battery. And we're going to run the system through the firewall. Because there's no heat in this car, there's lots of room there too. Let's take a look at the interior and I'll rough up what I'm doing here. Stock interior for the most part. Lots of room under the dash. I've got this little plastic heater thing here that barely works. That's going to come out. But my plan is to put the unit under here. Yes, you can get in-dash units and such. That's not the focus of this video. This video is, in my opinion, the most economical way that is practical and actually works. One thing you need to get used to when you're doing a system like this is you're not dealing with a huge name. This is not a Vintage Air, an old car Air, none of those. And I don't think those companies are necessary. I'm not knocking their products. The products are probably great, but they're expensive. They're certainly more than I want to pay. But you're going to have to get used to dealing with multiple vendors. I wasn't able to find a vendor that was economical that had every single component. Like, for example, this kit doesn't have an AC belt. Big deal. I'm not worried about that. This component also doesn't have an AC bracket to hold the compressor. So I went with a company for a bracket called Allen Grove Components. This looks like a pretty good bracket to me. It's made for the compressor. It's made for a small block Chevy with a short water pump. And I'm just going to mock it up. I haven't done anything yet, so I have no idea if this is going to work right or not. So roughly the bracket goes like that. It connects to your top water pump bolt there, your top water pump bolt here, and your two intake bolts. Am I concerned that loosening up all these bolts might cause some leaks? I am. I can't deny that. But I'm hoping that it doesn't. I already have a real tiny leak from this hose, so don't sweat that. There's a little fluid in here. I'll fix that as part of this installation. So I'm hoping that I don't create any leaks from it, but the bracket itself looks pretty nice. So I'm going to paint this up off camera, black with like the rest of the block, but you get the idea. So the price of this bracket was $122. So let's start with the $122 as your starting point for what this kit is going to cost. Could you use an AC bracket from a small block Chevy from a different car? Probably. As long as it's a short water pump car, I don't see why you couldn't. In this case, mine's a short water pump. If you find a long water pump bracket and you have a long water pump car, sure, that would probably work as well. You could scour the junkyards for that. That's not the intent of this video. The intent of this video is to buy off-the-shelf stuff. One more thing about the Allen Grove kit. Comes with all kinds of brackets, all kinds of bolts. That's cool. So this is the heart of the package. This arrived yesterday. It should be the complete AC kit. I'm going to open it up, show you what's here. Interesting that it came in a Home Depot box. You can't get more economical than that. First thing I see when I open the box is a screw kit. This might be used to mount the condenser. I'll find out. There's supposedly detailed instructions in here. We've got some hose. Let's see what this is. Okay, we've got a fan. You know, in my research on different kits, a lot of them don't come with fans, even the more expensive ones. You have to buy the fan separately, so be aware of that. This one does. Here is the condenser. This is a little bit smaller than I imagined. It's a lot smaller than I imagined. But again, I'm no expert on AC. Hopefully it's large enough. Some more hoses. And we have the wiring harness. This kit comes with a complete plug and play wiring harness. Everything you need. You don't need to fab up any wires. Here are the hose connections. And let's get the rest of this out of here and I'll get back to you. This here is the accumulator with the rubber O-rings. That's cool. This box contains the compressor. Most kits have the exact same type of compressor. I think it's called a Sanders. You'll see it more when I take it out of the box and start to install it. And then most importantly is this. This is the evaporator, and this is the piece that makes the most difference to you inside the car. And not only in how it works, but how it looks. So let's take a look. So this is the piece that sits inside. Let's take a look at it. Wiring harness is pre-wired, labeled connections, switches. What's this one for? On off. This unit has 4 outlets in it. There are lots of different kinds of these units offered out there. And I opted for this one. They have lots of different kinds. This one is going to have chrome round outlets on it that you'll see when I'm doing the installation. I thought that looked a lot more retro. I wanted black because this is black, but you could get all kinds of different ones. You can get wood, you can get brushed aluminum, you can get different colors of the outlets. You can get square vents. In no way did I want that in a 50s car, but you can get them. You can also get one with a defroster option. This car doesn't have it. One other thing I haven't mentioned, and it's not really the focus of the video, is this also has heat. So this unit can also have heat. And I am going to use heat in this car. Why not? It's here. But you can go even cheaper than I went without getting heat. But I figured if I'm under the dash and installing all this, I may as well put heat in it. So I'm going to leave this inside the car until I'm done under the hood. Because this thing I don't want to scratch, and I'm sure it's a little bit fragile, so I'm just going to leave it in here. I have no doubt you're all wondering, well, who's the vendor? You showed us the vendor for the bracket. What about the vendor for the entire kit? It's these guys. ECC Auto Shop, LLC. My understanding is they're in Miami. Miami's a pretty hot place, so I'm assuming these people know what they're talking about. I actually did speak to them because of the myriad of options for the kits. I actually called them, picked up the phone right away, was super helpful. No need for emails or a chat that goes to a foreign country. They picked up the phone. Again, they don't know I'm doing this video, nor that I even have a channel, but that's the company. Here is what the outlets are going to look like. They're very retro looking, so I like that. Okay, one thing I didn't find yet was the instructions, so I need to look for those before I get started. And here they are, right in the box. And these are the components I just walked through with you. I am not an AC person, so I'm going through this just like you're going to be going through it. I would describe the instructions as super basic. These are not detailed. It basically tells you where the hoses go. Okay, I can do that. More hoses. And then how to charge it. And this is useful for understanding when you charge it, how much PSI the low and high pressure side should have. That's it. No instructions about wiring or anything else, so let's hope it really is plug and play, which I think it will be, but let's hope so. The very first thing I'm going to do is make sure that the compressor lines up with the fan. So this bracket is sitting where it's going to sit, all bolted up. And I'm going to match up the mounting surface here with the mounting surface on the compressor and eyeball whether or not the fan belt, I'm going to use the outside fan belt, is going to work. And it does. This looks real good. Looks like I ordered the right bracket, so I'm cool there. One other thing, if you don't have double pulleys on your fan belt and crank, you're going to need them. I don't. Most Chevys I know, most cars I know have a double belt even if it's not used, because most cars have power steering and such. So I don't think you're going to run into that, but just in case, you can get them on Summit and they're super cheap if you need them. Another thing about this bracket, this is another one where I called the vendor for assistance and he picked up the phone right away and got it out to me quick. I had this thing in less than 3 days. This kit took less than 5 days. So neither company messed around with getting the kit to me. The first thing I'm going to tackle is mounting the brackets for the condenser. This is going to mount around the radiator in front of it. It comes with 4 of these, and it'd be nice if you could install them lengthwise, but I cannot because on my car there's too much distance between here and the mounting area. So I'm going to install them this way, which is still fine. It'll be plenty strong with one here and one down here. But unfortunately, these holes that are drilled don't match these holes. And they also don't match if this is straight up and down either. So you're going to have to do some drilling. So what I'm doing is I'm mounting one, and I've decided to mount it well below this connection to allow me room in here should I need it to get a wrench on the connection. So it's actually 1 slot low. And I'm putting a screw in there to hold it. And on the back side, I'm making sure that we're parallel here with the screw. And then I'm marking it with a marker, as you can see. And I'm just going to do that for all 4 and drill where the mark is. So no big deal, just a little bit of a hassle, but no big deal really. So ultimately, the condenser will sit like this, and it will have a bracket there, one here, and one there. And I will end up cutting these to length, whatever the right length is. I think I'm going to probably need until about here, but I'll figure that out once I get all these mounted. I screwed all 4 plates together, so I only have to drill once. So with any change that is going to be made as major as adding AC, there's going to be some modifications to the car. In this case, I had to move the horn. I'm probably going to move it down here because what I need to do is cut holes for the AC lines to come in here and connect to the condenser, which will be mounted here. These are minor changes, but they are changes that you need to consider. I mounted the fan actually crooked a little bit. It lined up better. with the condenser holes, and I actually like it. Obviously, do this before you do the final mount on the condenser. One other thing, I'm using blue Loctite on all of the mounting bolts for the fan, for the condenser, etc. I don't want these loosening up over time, and they're very small bolts. So that's what I'm using. This container's red, but it's actually the blue Loctite. The AC mount comes with some really good directions and a bunch of different parts and such. So when you mount it, you're going to have the intake bolts, which are too short. For mine, I bought some new Allen head bolts because the clearance on an Edelbrock RPM is too tight with a standard head bolt. But this kit has new bolts for that. It looks like it also has new water pump bolts too. So that's pretty neat. I'm going to see how this all mocks together, and we'll take it from there. This bracket kit uses a crazy interesting design where it uses this T-shaped bolt as your adjuster. It goes down into the bracket here, and you thread it in and out on this to adjust the belt. I also noticed that the bracket has, the compressor bracket has forward and backwards via the bolts on the intake manifold. That's really good to know. I had to shim this one. I may have to shim the back one as well, but we'll find out once I get this aligned. All right, the compressor's in, the belt's hooked up. This bracket is pretty cool. The directions were excellent. So far, I would recommend the bracket. We'll see how it all holds together when it's started. One of the probably larger challenges you're going to be faced with is how to get the hoses from the compressor to the evaporator under the dash, but that one's fairly straightforward. But more importantly, one of them goes to the condenser. So how do you do that? I've got a couple of options. I could literally just run it through here, but I think that looks pretty cheesy. I could also cut holes here and run it through, which is what I think I'm going to do. It's scary to me to cut this up. It's you know, painted up nice and everything, but just running it up above here, that doesn't seem cool to me. So I'm going to look at it a bit longer and make a decision. So now I'm test fitting how I want to mount this evaporator. There's some factory holes under the dash I'm trying to utilize. I don't like to just drill holes arbitrarily, but I think it's going to be too close. If you look at my foot there, I don't like that. It's a little too close. When you drive this car, because it's manual brakes, you have to lift your foot pretty high to hit the brake pedal. And that comes awful close to the evaporator. And also on this evaporator, the heater hose connections are on this side. And that's just going to heat up my foot unnecessarily. So I'm going to move it over just a bit, not a lot, maybe 2 inches. And that should give me the clearance I need. Let me go to the passenger side and see how that's going to work. So if I move this thing over a couple of inches, it's no problem. It's no problem. It's not great. I mean, this unit's big. It's big because it has the heater in it too. But I think we'll be okay just moving it over a couple of inches, but no more than that. The way this mounts is pretty simple. There's one of these on either side, and then you've got these brackets here that you find holes for, drill holes for, and then bend to fit. This is the way I had it mounted, but it's too far left. So it's going to need to go over to the right, so I'm going to have to drill some of my own holes, which is fine, in order to move it. And there's one of those on either side. And then there's a bracket for the back, which I haven't figured out where exactly that's going to go yet. What a difference an 1.5 inches makes right? So this is approximately where it's going to be. It's almost centered on the speaker, real close actually. Still plenty of room over here. And moving to the driver's side, my foot no longer feels at all restricted or cramped. So this is where it's going to sit. Of course, it's going to be tilted correctly and all that once I get it mounted. Sitting on a box on one side right now, but that's about where it's going to be. Roughly mounted. It looks pretty good. Like I say, roughly, so I need to level it off, but the brackets allow for that. Now the brackets are going to come out and be painted. Then I can bolt this up. So this is the dryer. Pretty simple device, mounts almost like a coil. I'm going to mount mine to the fender in here, but it's important to note the inlet port. You see that IN right there? That's super important because that must be connected to the condenser. So I'm going to mount it essentially this way with the inlet port towards the condenser. That means that I'm going to have my binaries pressure switch, which is right there, on this side of the dryer. It can go on either side. See that bolt there? You just pull the bolt out and replace it with the switch. But depending on how you mount it and what direction you're going is where you want this to actually sit. So mine's going to be around there. There is the center of the hole I'm attempting to drill. I have to come in from the back side. There's not enough clearance here. What I'm going to have to do next is get out a Dremel and just Dremel this out until I get to the template size. In order to cut the holes in the firewall, or at least enlarge them, I ended up using an air drill. I could have done it with a hand drill. I started to do it without. This was just so much faster. If you don't have one of these, don't panic. You can still do it without it. It's just going to take longer. The better thing to do, find a hole saw that actually cuts steel. Another component to consider that doesn't come with the kit is bulkheads. And there's a couple of routes you can take. You don't have to get them. I'm going to explain what they are and how you can get around purchasing them. Here's an example of where you would use a bulkhead. This is in the core support. These hoses need to come through the core support to connect to the condenser. So I had to make some holes. You can run the hose through the hole. This is not how it's going to be. There's going to be grommets in here. This is for demonstration purposes only. But they also make bulkheads for this, which have basically a steel connection on either side for you to connect an end to the hose, have the bulkhead handle running through the core support, and then use a connection on the other side to go to the condenser. The kit doesn't come with those. And you could also use them here on your firewall where you're going to go through the firewall. The way to get around that is to drill your holes oversized and use grommets. That's what I've decided to do for two reasons. First, it's much more economical, and this video is about doing this on the cheap, but doing it correctly. The second is that with a bulkhead, you're introducing for each hose 2 more leak points in and out of the bulkhead. And I'd rather not do that. I'd rather keep the leak points as few as possible. So that's what I'm going to do. The grommets are on order. And once I get them all in, I'll show you what it looks like. I don't think it's going to look too bad. This is the wiring harness that comes with the kit. It looks complete enough. It's got a relay built in, and everything is marked. Like this says compressor right there. It's good that it's marked because there's no instructions whatsoever. But again, it's not complex, but keep that in mind. But I'll show you how this hooks up. I've got the dryer bracket painted up. And one of the issues you'll find is the dryer bracket doesn't fit the dryer very well at all. I think it's meant to be pinched but when you pinch it this tight, then the holes get kind of funky. They're not flat against the surface. So what I'm going to do is I have this piece of foam rubber that I've cut to size. I'm just going to insert it in here and wrap this around the dryer. And I think that'll hold it, keep it vibration free, and give an overall better look to the installation. All right, the condenser is mounted. You can see the spacers I used to get it away from the radiator, those plastic things. They came from this kit that I got off of Amazon, all different sizes of spacers. I used this one, 3/4 inch spacer, and it seems to be perfect. This isn't going anywhere now. It's very, very tight, which is what I was hoping for. So on to the next step. The last thing I'm waiting for is the grommet kit. The grommets for the hoses to come through there and come through the firewall. It hasn't arrived yet, so I'm kind of stalled, but everything else is done. The wiring is mocked up. So once I get those grommets in, it's just making the rest of the hoses, and I think it'll be complete. So let's talk making the hoses for a minute. As you can see, my hoses are already made, but how did I do that? Well, you've got two options. The first is you can just use the supplied hose clamps. These are special hose clamps, and you could use these. But it looks a little bit cheesy, honestly, to use these clamps. It'll work. You just put them on like that. But the more pro method is to have a collar that you then crimp on. The collars all come with the kit, but the crimping tool does not. And I'm going to show you that. This is the crimping tool I got off of Amazon. I have no experience with it before, but it did the job. It comes with a knife, a cutter for cutting the hose. But more importantly, this is the main unit. And it's just a huge hydraulic jaw. These dies, which are marked according to the size of the hose, and the size of the hose is included in the kit instructions, are placed inside of the crimper, both top and bottom, like that. Okay, one up there, one up here. And then the hose and the collar is inserted into the tool. Now I'll do that and get back to you. So this is what it looks like before the hose and the collar are inserted. Now my collars are all used up because I'm doing this after I put the hoses in, but you get the idea. There's the collar. So before you put that in, you just push this end with the cap removed, this end into the hose as far as it will go. Use a little bit of compressor oil here. These can be super hard to get in as deeply as they need to go. So use that compressor oil that you're using on the O-rings on these as well. You push it all the way in, and it's inserted in here, and then all you do is squeeze this, and you will see that the jaws start to compact. See that? And what that's doing is it's crimping the collar onto the hose. These barbs have a major role in holding everything together, and the crimper, the collar supports that role. How do you know when to stop crimping? You'll know because you won't be able to squeeze this anymore. You can squeeze it as tight as you like, and when it stops, you'll be done. And that's it, that hose end is crimped. I found this tool to be well worth it. I had never used it before, but now I have it. I can use it for other hydraulic hoses, power steering and such, so This to me was well worth the investment. This is much better to me than using these, but again, those would have worked. It just wouldn't have looked as clean. And the kit comes with both. So it's up to you which way you go. One more thing about making these AC hoses. I keep pointing to this one, and that's the worst hose that I made. See the space in here? This was the first hose I made, and I did not push this far enough into the hose. I really should have gone all the way, sort of like this one here, and these over here. So make sure you push these in all the way. It's hard. You got to use that compressor oil on them and push them in really, really far. This works, it holds pressure, but I just would have been more comfortable doing it right, and this one is not done right, so keep that in mind. The pre-cut hole in the firewall is just a little too small for the grommet. The hose fits, but not with the grommet. So I'm using the air grinder again to just open it up a little bit. It doesn't need to go much. Okay, the grommet's in. Unfortunately, I slipped with the grinder and scratched the paint on the firewall. I'll touch that up later. That's a bummer, but it is what it is. That's going to happen when you're doing stuff like this. But the hose fits in real nice. So now I just have to connect it up to the evaporator. Let's take a look at these AC fittings. Most of us are used to installing brake lines. These are not the same. Brake lines are a flare fitting, and they rely on some pressure from the nut to seal the flare together. These are not like that. Everything's aluminum we're dealing with, and it's not designed to have it tightened super tight to make a seal. Instead, it relies on an O-ring. Let's take a look at that. See that O-ring right there? Each AC hose fitting has an O-ring on it. And the O-ring sits down inside, just at the very top of the connection. So when you're installing this, it's a two-handed job. You're going to hold this down straight so that the O-ring is in the hole. See that? Not like this, but like that. The O-ring is in the hole 360 degrees around. And then with your right hand, tighten the fitting by hand. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to put the camera down and do that. So hand tightening it, I was able to get it tightened all the way almost to the end of the threads. This line isn't rocking at all. It's a nice solid connection. From there, you just put a wrench on it, and preferably a flare wrench, and just tighten it about a 1/16 of a turn. Again, you're not using these aluminum fittings to put a lot of pressure on everything. You just need to snug it up because the O-ring is what's sealing it. So I'm at the point now where I can start to actually tighten up some fittings. The hoses are cut and they're loosely installed, but I need to start to tighten things up. All right, I've run into something weird here. So this piece in the back is called the expansion valve. It's in the back of the evaporator. And you connect this hose from the dryer to it. But what I found was in here, there's some gooey stuff. I mean, it's packed full of some kind of gooey stuff. I assume that was put there to keep everything dry. And it's important to keep all these components dry before installation. So I checked with a viewer and a friend of mine, Gary, and he's with me that that stuff must have been a plug that has gone south, and it needs to come out. So I'm going to spend a few minutes cleaning this out. It's important to get all of it out because any kind of stuff in that system that doesn't belong there is going to cause grief. So that's exactly what it was. just a plug that was in there, and over time it had started to break down and get gooey. It was a lot easier to get out than I thought it would be. Because it's a universal kit, some wires in the harness are just super, super long. So I cut them and respliced them correctly and covered the splice with heat shrink. This is heat shrink tubing. You just put it over the connection, heat it up, and it shrinks to cover the connection. So I've done that anywhere I cut it. I think I had to make 3 cuts. The wire, this wire that goes to the evaporator, this wire that goes to the battery, and maybe that's the only, oh, and the compressor trigger. That was way too long as well. Your mileage may vary depending on whether you put it on the left side, right side, etc. But that's what I had to do. The evaporator installation is complete. What I did for the switch mounting was I drilled 2 holes in between the outlets. There's plenty of room in there to do that. This one's for fan speed, this one's for temp. Make sure if you go that route, you mount this switch high enough so that you have enough room around the switch to move full 360 here, because this switch has a little part that sticks out when you turn it. So that's important to note. Also, you'll note that this front looks a little bit different than what you've been seeing in the video so far. That's because I ordered the wrong kit. I ordered the kit with the hose, and the hose is meant to be run through the dash. I didn't want that. I wanted this that has the outlets right here, without any hose, without the black part sticking out. So I called the company, and they sent me this free of charge. I didn't even have to pay for shipping for them to send it to me. All I had to do was return what I did not need, which was just this front piece, not the whole evaporator, just this front piece. And I paid for that shipping. So they covered it all with a simple phone call. It's ECC Auto Shop. They were just wonderful about it, and they got it to me quick. When I called them, it was in the mail the same day. So this is how it's supposed to look. That's how I wanted it to look. And all I had to do was change this cover to do so. One important note about this temp switch: it has a probe on it that needs to sense the temperature, not of the car, but of this unit. So the way this works is, the probe is pretty long. It's a long, small capillary tube. I ran it from the switch over here and through the tubes that circle around on the side of the evaporator. There's no danger of puncturing anything there, and it seems to be a good place because it's really sensitive to temperature, and the temperature of the evaporator is very strong at that point. That's what I did. I know that some AC evaporator manufacturers recommend that you stick the probe right into the fins. I didn't do that. I didn't see the need to take that risk, and I just did not do that. Here is the finished product. Compressor's in. There is the dryer, the hoses with the grommets. I got the relay mounted in there. Cut a lot of wires on the relay, as I said earlier, to make them shorter, fit nicer. And the condenser with the fan. So far, so good. It blows cold. The engine's not running hot. But I'm going to take it for a long trip soon, and we'll see how it performs then. But I'm pretty satisfied right now. That's what it looks like in the dash. These things move around. Looks pretty retro. Here's the 2 switches. I'm probably going to find some more retro looking knobs for those switches, but it works really good. So the key is now on, so the blower mode is here. The temperature is here. So it's really, really neat. This is a very, very nice kit. So this is the kit that I bought. Now this one has heat and cool in it. And you can see the price there Very, very reasonable. But let's look at the one if you only had cool. Here's a very similar kit that's cool only, and the price here is $545. Not a huge difference, but it is cheaper. Okay, here's the moment I'm sure you've all been waiting for. Did we make the $800 goal? Well, let's look at what we spent. So the AC kit itself for cool only was $545. The bracket was $122. The spacers, $1426. The grommets, $999. The heat shrink tubing, super cheap at $359. The crimper tool was $109.99. And the charge of the system was $50. You might be able to charge it yourself for less, but I wouldn't recommend it because the first thing they do when they charge it is they evacuate it. So what that does is it pulls any moisture that may have gotten in there while you were installing it out of the system. And it also checks for leaks. They run that vacuum test on it for a long time, and it checks for any leaks. So with all these costs in place, what was the total? There's your total, $854.83. That's what the entire kit costs to install, including the crimper tool. I think that's pretty reasonable, just over our $800 target. So now that the cost has been summarized, would I do this again? Was it a good idea to bypass the more known manufacturers and to go this route? I say absolutely. I saved hundreds, if not $1,000+ on this system. And it was pretty easy to install. And hopefully this video helps you supplement the directions that are included in the kit. Both vendors I used, ECC and the vendor for the bracket, were fantastic. Picked up the phone immediately, gave me great support. I see no reason to go with any other vendor for this stuff. Now again, these people don't know me. And if I didn't feel this way, I wouldn't tell you. I've just found so very little to complain about this kit, and it works awesome. We just got back from day 2 of the power tour, and it's hot out. It was mid-80s the whole time, and day 1 was what I would call an air conditioning torture test. We're literally in traffic 3.5 hours trying to get into the show area. And it was hot, and the sun was on us, and it was really brutal. This car is not insulated well inside. It looks like it is, but that's only tape on the floor. It's not insulation. And this AC kept up just fine. Now the car did get hot, so I had to shut down the AC after about an hour in traffic, but that's not the AC's fault. The car got hot. I don't know if it would have gotten hot without this condenser in the way. It may have, may not have, but it's an easy solution, and I'll show you what I'm going to do to solve it. This car doesn't have a fan shroud, and it has an old school 5-blade steel fan. It's been great. I've never had it run hot, but I've also never put it through what I put it through Monday, day 1 of power tour. It's just ridiculous. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this fan out. I'm going to install an electric fan, a high CFM electric fan that covers the whole face of this radiator, and I think that will solve the problem. I had the AC on full with moving even more than just a few miles an hour, and the temperature was fine. It was really an airflow issue when I was sitting still. So I think that electric fan will solve the problem. I hope this video was helpful for you. For anyone interested in an AC or looking to install an AC kit, hopefully this helped you out. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. Consider subscribing. Every subscriber that I get helps the channel, so I really do appreciate that. And thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. I always appreciate it. Comment what you think about this. I read them all. So thank you again. Have a great day.